My husband threw the divorce papers across the kitchen table and said, "I'm leaving you for someone else. You're not getting a single dime." I just smiled and signed every single page. He celebrated for an entire week, but the second he actually looked at what I signed, his world completely collapsed. Hi everyone, I'm Diana. I'm so glad you're here. Please subscribe to the channel and give this video a thumbs up. Also, let me know in the comments which city you're listening from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. That life was something I built with my own two hands, literally. In our early years, I was the one staying up until 2 in the morning, balancing financial ledgers at the kitchen table, while Daniel slept soundly in the next room. When his landscaping business was on the brink of bankruptcy back in 2014, I took on a second job to keep us afloat. That first summer, I was the one who found the house on Mercer Lane, bargained the price down by $11,000, and painted every single room myself because we couldn't afford contractors. My name is Claire Harmon. I was 38 years old when my husband handed me that manila envelope across our kitchen table and told me our marriage was over. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Before that Tuesday morning, by any normal standard, I thought we were a rock-solid family. Daniel and I had been married for 14 years. We had a 12-year-old daughter, Lily, who was obsessed with marine biology. We had a golden retriever named Biscuit who shed everywhere. We had a mortgage with 9 years left, a joint savings account, and a standing reservation every Friday night at Carmine's on Fifth Avenue. I thought we had a life. Daniel ran his landscaping company, Harmon and Green. Even though there was no green, he just thought it sounded prestigious. I worked downtown as a senior project manager at an architecture firm. My salary had quietly become the backbone of our household, especially after Daniel's business partner walked away in 2019 and the company never quite recovered its momentum. I didn't mind. Marriage is a long game, and I was always playing for the long haul. The Chicago wind was brutal that night. It was the kind of cold that cuts straight through your coat and settles in your bones. I had just landed at O'Hare after 3 exhausting days of negotiations in New York, saving a deal my husband, Mark, had nearly ruined with his arrogance. I was bone-tired. My eyes burned from lack of sleep, and my shoulder ached from the weight of my laptop bag. All I wanted was a hot shower, a glass of wine, and the comfort of my home. I wanted to tell Mark that I had cleaned up his mess, and that the H&M real estate empire we spent 22 years building was secure for the next quarter. I pulled into the driveway of our suburban estate. The living room lights were blazing, casting a harsh glow against the dark, snow-covered lawn. That was strange. Usually, by 10 at night, the house was quiet. Mark would be in his study, and my 21-year-old son, Tyler, would either be in his room gaming or out with friends. I unlocked the front door and tossed my keys into the bowl on the foyer table. The silence that greeted me wasn't peaceful. It was heavy, like the static in the air right before a thunderstorm. "Hello," I called out, hanging up my coat. "Mark, Tyler, anyone home?" "Heather," my mother's voice drifted from the living room. My stomach tightened. My mother, Joyce, lived 40 minutes away. What was she doing here on a Tuesday night? A sudden wave of panic hit me. Had something happened to my sister, Brenda? Was someone sick? I rushed into the living room, my heart hammering against my ribs. But this wasn't a medical emergency. It was an intervention, or rather an ambush. They were all there, arranged on the custom leather sectional I had personally picked out last Christmas. Mark sat in the middle, looking sharp in a crisp white shirt, but he wouldn't meet my eyes. To his left sat my mother, Joyce, her posture rigid, hands clasped tightly in her lap. To his right was Brenda, my own sister. And in the armchair nearby sat my son, Tyler. The atmosphere was suffocating. No one was crying. No one looked sad. They looked resolved. "What's going on?" I asked, my breath catching in my throat. "Is everyone okay, Mom?" I took a step forward, but Tyler stood up. He didn't come to hug me. He stood like a guard blocking the way. The look in his eyes held none of the warmth I had nurtured for over 2 decades. "Mom, sit down," Tyler said. His voice was cold, deeper than I remembered, stripped of all affection. "You need to listen and you need to not react." React. Tyler, you're scaring me. What is this? You need to accept a new reality, he continued, reciting words that sounded rehearsed. You're not running things anymore. I looked at Mark. Mark, talk to me. What is he talking about? Mark finally looked up. His handsome face, the face that had been the public image of our company for years, sneered with a mixture of pity and annoyance. It's over, Heather. This whole setup is finished. What setup? I felt like I was drowning on dry land. Aunt Brenda, Tyler said, pointing to my sister. She actually makes Dad happy. Unlike you, she understands him. The room seemed to tilt. I looked at Brenda, my own sister, whose rent I had paid for 6 years. The sister I hired when no one else would give her a job. She was sitting with her legs crossed, wearing a silk blouse that looked incredibly familiar, like the one missing from my closet. And then I saw it. Mark's hand was resting casually, possessively, on Brenda's knee. We didn't want you to find out from outsiders, my mother, Joyce, chimed in. Her voice held no apology. It was patronizing. We wanted to handle this as a family. Heather, you have to be realistic. You've been married to your job for years. Mark is a man with needs. He needs a wife who is present, not a business partner who sleeps with her laptop. Mom, I whispered, the betrayal cutting deeper than any physical pain. You knew about this. You're supporting this. I support happiness, Joyce said, chin tilted defiantly. Brenda and Mark have a connection. They fell in love, Heather. It's not something they planned, it just happened. You can't punish them for finding love. I looked at Brenda. She let out a small, triumphant smile, tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, and looked down. On her finger, sparkling under the recessed lighting, was a diamond ring. It wasn't a new ring. It was my ring. The vintage Art Deco diamond ring Mark had given me for our 20th anniversary. The one that had mysteriously vanished from my jewelry box 6 months ago. I had torn the house apart looking for it, crying for days. Mark had told me I was careless, that I probably lost it at the gym. That is my ring, I said, my voice trembling with a hot, rising fury. It suits her better, Mark shrugged. It was wasted on you anyway. You never wear jewelry. We want you to move out, Tyler spoke up again, shattering whatever was left of my composure. Dad keeps the house. I'm staying here. It's better if you just go. You bring too much tension into this place. My son, my baby boy. The one I stayed up with through every fever. The one I worked 80-hour weeks to put through college. He was casting me out of the home I built. You're choosing this, I asked Tyler, tears finally stinging my eyes. You're choosing the woman who was seeing your father behind my back. That is your aunt, Tyler. She's more than just my aunt now, Tyler sneered. She's the only one who actually listens to me. All you ever did was throw money at me and tell me to study. Dad and Brenda actually treat me like an adult. I looked at the 4 of them. My husband, my sister, my mother, my son, the pillars of my life, and every single one of them was rotten to the core. They weren't just breaking my heart. They were systematically dismantling my existence with casual, suffocating cruelty. A wave of nausea hit me, but I swallowed it down. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing me break. I wouldn't scream, and I wouldn't beg. I straightened my spine. I looked at Mark, locking eyes with him until he flinched and looked away. You think you've won, I said, my voice quiet but deadly calm. You think you can just rewrite history because you're bored and selfish. Don't cause a scene, Heather, Brenda said, her voice sickeningly sweet. Let's handle this divorce like adults. Divorce? I let out a short, dry laugh. Oh, you have absolutely no idea what's coming. Don't threaten us, Mark snapped, his arrogance returning. I've already spoken to legal. You're out. The prenup, the company bylaws, I've got it covered. Walk out that door, Heather. If you stay, I'll have security remove you from my property. Your property? I looked around. I chose every tile in this house. I paid for every brick. And now you're trespassing, Tyler said. That was it, the final break. I looked at my son one last time, memorizing the face of the stranger he had become. Fine, I said. I turned on my heel. I didn't take off my coat. I didn't grab my keys from the bowl. I had a spare set in my pocket. I walked toward the door. "Where are you going?" Joyce called out, a sudden note of anxiety in her voice. "Heather, we need to discuss the settlement. Mark has a very generous offer if you sign tonight." I didn't answer. I pushed open the heavy oak door and stepped out into the freezing Chicago night. The wind hit my face, drying my tears before they could even fall. I got into my car, the engine roaring to life in the quiet driveway. As I backed out, I saw them through the window. They were already pouring champagne. They were celebrating my erasure. I drove into the darkness, my grip on the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew one thing with absolute certainty. The Heather they knew, the pushover, the provider, the fixer, ended tonight in that living room. And the woman driving this car was someone they should be very, very afraid of. If you're listening to this, and you're just as angry as I was in that moment, please hit that like button and type the number 1 in the comments. Let me know you're standing with me. Your support tells me I'm not alone in this fight. Comment 1 right now, because believe me, what they did next makes this betrayal look like a warm-up. I drove for an hour, the city lights of Chicago blurring into streaks of red and gold through my windshield. My mind was a chaotic storm of images. Brenda's smirk, the ring on her finger, Tyler's cold gaze. But beneath the shock, a primal instinct was waking up. Survival. I needed gas. The fuel light had been blinking since I left the airport, but I had been too eager to get home to stop. Now, on a desolate stretch of highway, I pulled into a 24-hour gas station. My hands shook as I stepped into the biting cold. I swiped my credit card at the pump, the platinum card linked to our joint account, the one I used to pay for everything from groceries to corporate dinners. Processing. The screen flashed red. Declined. Contact cashier. I frowned. That was impossible. The card had a $50,000 limit, and I had paid the balance in full just 3 days ago. I tried again. Declined. A cold pit formed in my stomach, heavier than the betrayal I had just witnessed. I reached into my purse and pulled out my personal debit card, the one linked to my checking account where my salary was deposited. I walked inside the gas station. The bored teenager behind the counter, headphones draped around his neck, didn't even look up as I placed a bottle of water and a pack of gum on the counter. I swiped the debit card. "Didn't go through," he mumbled, blowing a bubble. "Try it again," I said, my voice tight. "There's money in there." He sighed and swiped it again. "Declined, ma'am. Insufficient funds or the card is locked. Do you have cash?" I stood under the harsh fluorescent lights, frozen. My banking app. I needed to check my banking app. My fingers fumbled with my phone to log in. Access denied. User authentication failed. Please contact your branch. I tried the business accounts. Access denied. I tried the joint savings. Access denied. Mark hadn't just kicked me out of the house. He had executed a financial blackout. He had been planning this. You don't lock a co-owner out of business and personal accounts overnight unless you've spent days laying the groundwork with the bank, claiming fraud or changing administrative rights. He wanted me broke. He wanted me stranded in the middle of the night with no resources, figuring I would crawl back and sign whatever generous offer Joyce had mentioned. I dug through my bag, past the useless plastic cards, to a small zippered pocket at the bottom. I found 3 crumpled $20 bills and a handful of quarters. $60. That was my entire net worth. I paid cash for 5 gallons of gas and the water. I got back in my car, shivering, not just from the cold, but from the terrifying realization of how vulnerable I was. I couldn't go to a hotel. I had no credit card for the deposit. I couldn't go to my mother's house. I couldn't go to Brenda. I drove until I found a motel with a flickering neon sign that read, "Vacancy." The kind of place where truck drivers sleep for a few hours, where the sheets smell of stale smoke and regret. "Cash up front," the night manager said through bulletproof glass. "50 a night." I handed over 50 of my remaining $60. He slid a key across the tray. Room 12. The room was freezing. The heater rattled, blowing air that smelled of burnt dust. I sat on the edge of the sagging mattress, still in my expensive business suit, coat wrapped tightly around me. I looked at my phone. The screen was flooded with notifications. Not apologies, not please come back. I had over 100 missed calls, mostly from a number I recognized. Mark's personal attorney, a shark named Robert Vance. Then the emails started chiming. Subject: dissolution of marriage settlement agreement. Subject: urgent NDA requirement. Subject: termination notice, H&M Real Estate. I opened the termination notice first. It was a PDF attachment from the HR director, a woman I had hired and personally mentored. Dear Ms. Heather Bryant, effective immediately. Your position as Chief Operating Officer is terminated for cause. Allegations: corporate espionage and gross negligence. I laughed, a harsh, barking sound in the empty room. Espionage, negligence. I was the one who stayed up until 3 in the morning auditing the books. I was the one who knew every zoning law in Chicago. Mark didn't even know how to convert a document to a PDF without asking me for help. Then a text came in. It was from Tyler. My thumb hovered over the screen. A tiny, foolish part of me hoped he had slipped away, that he was sorry. Tyler, Mom, don't make this difficult. Dad says if you fight the divorce, he'll cut off my tuition and my trust fund. He promised me the VP position next year if I side with him. You always taught me to be ambitious. I'm just doing what you taught me. Please understand. I dropped the phone onto the bed, as if it had burned me. That was the final blow. Mark hadn't just taken my money and my job. He had bought my son's loyalty. He used the wealth I helped build to bribe my own child against me. I curled up on the dingy bedspread, pulling my knees to my chest. The tears finally came, hot and fast. I cried for the boy I used to read bedtime stories to. I cried for the sister I had protected. I cried for the husband I believed in when he had nothing but a smile and a cheap suit. But as the night wore on, and the tears dried, something else began to settle in my chest. It felt cold, heavy, and solid as stone. They thought they had erased me. They thought that by taking the credit cards and the passwords, they had stripped me of my power. They forgot one crucial detail. They forgot who built the castle they were sitting in. They forgot who designed the security systems, who drafted the contracts, and who knew where all the digital skeletons were buried. Mark believed H&M Real Estate ran on his charm. He was about to find out it ran on my brain. And while he might have stolen the keys to the front door, he forgot that the architect always keeps a back door. I stared at the water stain on the ceiling, waiting for the sun to rise. I was no longer Heather the wife. I was no longer Heather the mother. I was Heather the architect, and I was going to bring the whole house down. Sleeping was impossible in that motel room. The interstate highway noise was a constant rumble, but the noise in my head was worse. Jagged memories played on a loop. To understand how I ended up on a dirty mattress with $10 to my name, I had to look back. I had to examine the foundation of my life and realize it had been cracked from the very beginning. I grew up in a small town in Ohio, the older of 2 daughters. My father passed away when I was 7, leaving my mother, Joyce, to raise us alone. His loss broke something in her, or perhaps it just exposed who she really was. She was a woman who needed to be adored, who needed to be the center of attention, and she projected that need onto her children, or more accurately, onto one of them. Brenda was born beautiful. Even as a baby, she had blonde curls and big blue eyes that stopped strangers on the street. I was the plain one with brown hair, serious eyes, and a sturdy build. I was the responsible one. Brenda was the princess. I remember my 18th birthday. I had just received my acceptance letter to the University of Chicago, along with a partial scholarship. It was my ticket out of there. I had worked 3 jobs all through high school, tutoring, waitressing, shelving books at the library, to save enough for the rest of my tuition. I ran into the kitchen, waving the letter. Mom, I got in. Joyce was sitting at the table, painting Brenda's nails. 12-year-old Brenda was already demanding and temperamental. That's nice, Heather, Mom said without looking up. Keep it down, though. Brenda has a headache. But Mom, it's Chicago, it's the business school. Joyce sighed and finally looked at me. Her eyes held no pride, only calculation. Heather, honey, we need to talk about that money you saved. My college fund. Well, Brenda was scouted by an agency. There's a modeling convention in Orlando next month. It could be her big break, but the entry fees, travel, and portfolio photos are very expensive. My stomach sank. Mom, that's my tuition. I earned that. You're being selfish, Heather, Brenda chimed in, blowing on her wet nails. Don't you want me to be famous? I'll buy you a car when I make it. Heather, Mom said, using that tone that mixed guilt with authority. You're the strong one, you're smart, you'll always find a way. You can work another year, go to night school, but Brenda is delicate. This is her dream. You wouldn't want to crush your sister's dream, would you? Family sacrifices for one another. I gave them the money. Of course I did. I had been conditioned for 18 years to believe my only worth was what I could provide. I was the workhorse, the fixer. Brenda was the star, the one who deserved to shine. Brenda went to Orlando. She didn't get signed. She spent the money on clothes and theme parks. I spent the next year working double shifts at a diner to earn the tuition back. I started college a year late, exhausted but determined. That dynamic never changed. It just evolved. When I graduated at the top of my class, Mom didn't attend because Brenda was having a crisis over a breakup with a boyfriend of 2 weeks. I walked across the stage alone. When I got my first major promotion at a financial firm, Mom said, "That's wonderful, dear. Say, can you lend Brenda $2,000? Her landlord is being unreasonable." I paid Brenda's rent. I paid for her car repairs. I paid for acting classes she never attended. I bought Mom a condo so she wouldn't have to climb stairs. I thought I was buying their love. I thought if I just gave enough, worked hard enough, and solved enough problems, they would finally look at me the way they looked at Brenda. I thought one day Mom would hold my face and say, "I'm so proud of you, Heather. You're my joy." But I was never their joy. I was their utility bill. I was their safety net. Then I met Mark. He was charming, ambitious, and he seemed to truly see me. He told me I was brilliant and beautiful. I didn't realize back then that he had the same calculating look in his eyes as my mother. He didn't see a soulmate. He saw a host. He saw a woman trained to give everything and ask for nothing in return. He stepped perfectly into the hollow space my mother and sister had carved out of me. I married him, thinking I was building a new, better family. Lying in that dark motel room, the truth hit me with physical force. I hadn't escaped my family dynamic by marrying Mark. I had rebuilt it. Mark became the new star who demanded adoration and resources. I was still the workhorse, laboring in the shadows to keep everything running. And Brenda was just the inevitable conclusion. The two parasites in my life had finally found each other. "You're the strong one, Heather," my mother's voice echoed in my memory. Well, she was right about one thing. I was strong enough to carry them for 40 years. And now, heaven help them, I was strong enough to drop them. I sat up in bed, the springs groaning. I was done crying. The grief was gone, replaced by a cold, clinical clarity. They wanted delicate Brenda. They wanted dreaming Mark. Fine. They could have each other, but they weren't taking my money. They weren't taking my company. I reached for my laptop bag. It was time to stop being the sacrificial daughter and start being the CEO who liquidates bad assets. The morning light filtered through the motel's dingy curtains, casting long, dusty shadows across the floor. I opened my laptop. Thankfully, I had a portable Wi-Fi hotspot in my bag, a habit from years of business travel. Mark couldn't cut off a device he didn't even know existed. I didn't try to log into the bank accounts first. I knew those doors were locked. Instead, I opened a file labeled H&M Archive 01. To understand how I was going to dismantle Mark, you have to understand how I built him. I met Mark 22 years ago at a real estate networking event in downtown Chicago. He was 29, wearing a slightly ill-fitting suit, holding a glass of cheap wine, and talking big to a group of investors. He was magnetic. He had a smile that could sell ice to an Arctic explorer, and a laugh that made you feel like the funniest person in the room. I was 25, a junior analyst at a top firm, standing in the corner clutching my market research folder. I watched him work the room. He was charming, but I could hear what he was actually saying. He was using buzzwords, promising investors cap rates on properties in declining zones that were mathematically impossible. He cornered me near the buffet. "You look like you're analyzing the structural integrity of that shrimp cocktail," he joked. I didn't laugh. "I'm analyzing your pitch to those investors. You're promising a 15% cap rate on a property in an area that's losing value. You're going to lose their money." He blinked, surprised, and then he laughed. "Well, you caught me. I'm an idea guy, not a numbers guy. I need someone who understands the boring stuff." "The boring stuff is what keeps you out of trouble," I said dryly. He fell for me, or rather, he fell for what I could do for him. We were married within 6 months, and within a year, we started H&M Real Estate. The division of labor was set immediately. Mark was the face. He was the CEO. He met clients, played golf with developers, and did interviews with business journals. He loved the spotlight and the title. I was the architect. I was the COO. But in reality, I was everything else. I found the properties, negotiated the loans, managed the contractors, and fought City Hall for zoning permits. I handled taxes, payroll, and legal compliance. Our first major project was a disaster waiting to happen. Mark had bought an old warehouse in the meatpacking district, convinced it would make a great loft conversion. He overpaid by $500,000, and the contractor he hired ran off with our deposit. We were facing bankruptcy before we even sold a single unit. I remember sitting at our kitchen table, pregnant with Tyler, looking at the red ink on our ledgers. Mark was packing, sweating through his shirt. "We're ruined, Heather," he cried. "My reputation is shot. They're going to sue us." "Sit down," I commanded. I took my grandmother's jewelry, the only thing I had inherited that I kept hidden from my mother and Brenda, and sold it. I emptied my retirement account. I renegotiated the loan terms with the bank, presenting a business plan so detailed the loan officer said it was the best he'd ever seen. I fired Mark's friend who had been acting as project manager and took over the site supervision myself, waddling around the construction zone in a hard hat at 6 months pregnant. We finished the project, and we sold out in 3 weeks. Mark was hailed as a visionary in Crane's Chicago business. The headline read, "Mark Bryant, the new king of loft conversions." He came home beaming, holding the magazine. "Look at this, babe, we made it." He hadn't mentioned me once in the interview. When I gently pointed it out, he kissed my forehead. "Sweetheart, you know how the media is. They like a single hero story. Besides, you hate the spotlight. You're my secret weapon, the power behind the throne." I accepted it. I told myself it was for the family. I told myself it didn't matter whose face was on the cover as long as the company succeeded. I was a fool. For 20 years, I built the stage, set the lights, and wrote the script. Mark just had to walk out and take a bow. The company grew, expanding into commercial real estate, luxury condos, and mixed-use developments. We were worth millions. But the architecture of the company, that was my masterpiece. Mark never bothered with details. He hated reading contracts and remembering passwords. "You handle it, Heather," was his mantra. So I built our digital infrastructure. I created a web of LLCs to limit liability. I set up automated bank transfers. And because Mark was paranoid about employees stealing, he insisted on a localized, heavily encrypted internal server for our most sensitive financial data. He wanted a ghost key, a master admin credential that could bypass all other protocols in case we were locked out or hacked. "Only you and I will ever know this ghost key," he had said. But Mark never bothered to memorize the complex 64-character string I generated. He wrote it on a sticky note, kept it in his drawer for a week, and then threw it away. He assumed I would always be there to enter it for him. He was right, I always was, until yesterday. Now, sitting in the motel, I stared at the login screen of the H&M private server. The VPN connection was secure. Mark thought that by calling the banks and removing my signing authority, he had cut me off. He thought that by having HR fire me, he had revoked my access. He was relying on standard protocols. He was relying on the front door. He forgot about the ghost key. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I typed the string. It was a line of poetry I loved, mixed with the GPS coordinates of the first building we bought and the date Tyler lost his first tooth. Mark didn't know any of those things. Authenticating. Processing. Access granted. Administrator level. The screen flooded with data. The entire nervous system of H&M real estate was laid out before me. Emails, bank transfers, wire logs, tax documents, private chats. I wasn't just looking at a company, I was looking at the crime scene of my marriage. I began downloading. I didn't want just a few files, I wanted everything. Every email Mark had sent in the last 5 years. Every expense report, every wire transfer to offshore accounts. And then I saw it. A folder labeled Project B. It wasn't a construction project. B stood for Brenda. I opened the folder, the color draining from my face. This wasn't just an affair. This was systematic financial siphoning. Dates, amounts, receipts. January 12. Wire transfer of $50,000 to B. Miller Consulting. Miller was Brenda's maiden name. February 14. $12,000 at Cartier. March 1. $4,500 monthly rent for a luxury suite at the Drake Hotel. 3 years. He had been funding Brenda's lifestyle using company money for 3 years. But it went deeper than that. I saw transfers to a shell company I didn't recognize, Orion Holdings. The signatory for Orion Holdings wasn't Mark, it was Brenda. And they weren't just transferring cash, they were transferring deeds. Mark was slowly moving the titles of our most valuable, debt-free properties into a company owned by my sister. He was gutting H&M real estate, planning to leave me with an empty shell of a business, while he and Brenda rode off into the sunset with the assets. I felt a wave of nausea. This wasn't just about replacing me, it was grand larceny. But as I scrolled through the documents, a cold smile tugged at my lips. Mark was a showman, not an architect. He didn't understand the legal mechanics of the papers he was signing. Driven by his arrogance and Brenda's greed, they had made mistakes, sloppy amateur errors. They had forged my signature on the property transfer deeds. I could see it clearly on the PDFs, a digital copy-paste job of my signature lifted from an older document. And on the operating agreement for Orion Holdings, Brenda had listed her permanent address as my address, the house I paid for. I had them completely. But I couldn't strike just yet. If I went to the police now, Mark would claim it was a clerical error, pay a fine, and tie me up in litigation for years with expensive lawyers. I had $10, he had millions. No, I needed to let them feel secure. I needed them to believe I was defeated, broke, and hiding in a corner. I closed my laptop. I had the blueprint for their undoing. Now I just had to build the trap. The digital evidence of Project B burned in my mind, forcing me to recall exactly how Brenda had managed to infiltrate my life in the first place. It started 5 years ago, when H&M real estate was at its peak, and I let my guard down. Brenda had just gone through her 3rd divorce. Her ex-husband, a hard-working mechanic named Dave, had left her because she refused to work and spent his entire paycheck on designer bags she couldn't afford. She showed up at my doorstep with 2 suitcases, crying a sob story worthy of an Academy Award. "He was awful, Heather," she sobbed, throwing herself into my arms. I later found out awful meant he cut up her credit cards. "I have nowhere else to go. Mom said you'd help me." 10 minutes later, Joyce called. "Heather, you have that big house with all those empty guest rooms. Let your sister stay for a few weeks. She just needs to get back on her feet. Family helps family." I agreed. I always agreed. A few weeks turned into 6 months. Brenda spent her days lounging by my pool, drinking my wine and ordering my gardeners around. At the time, Mark seemed annoyed by her. "She's lazy, Heather," he would complain. "She treats our home like a resort." I defended her. "She's hurting, Mark. Give her some time." Then came the request. "I need a job," Brenda announced over dinner one night. "I'm bored. I want to work for your company." I nearly choked on my water. "Brenda, we run a commercial real estate firm. It's high pressure. What skills do you have for that?" "I'm good with people," she insisted. I don't know, client relations. I can plan parties. I can talk to investors. You two are so serious. You need someone fun." "No," I said. It was one of the few times I set a firm boundary. But Joyce intervened. She drove 40 minutes to have coffee with me. "Heather, this is Brenda's chance to become responsible. If you don't give her a job, she'll spiral. Do you want her living on your couch forever? Put her on payroll, get her an apartment. Mark thinks it's a great idea." I blinked. "Mark thinks it's a good idea." "I talked to him," Joyce said smoothly. "He thinks Brenda could help soften the company's image. You can be a bit intimidating sometimes, dear." I asked Mark, "You want to hire Brenda?" He shrugged, adjusting his tie. "Your mother has a point. We need someone to handle the social side of things, the dinners, the charity events. You hate that stuff. Let her do it. Give her an assistant's salary. It gets her out of our house. It's a win-win." I relented. I gave her a title, Director of Special Events. At first, things seemed fine. Brenda moved into an apartment, subsidized by me, and planned the company Christmas party. It was lavish, wildly over budget, but a success. Then, the subtle changes began. Brenda started coming to the office every day, wearing form-fitting dresses that bordered on inappropriate for a professional setting. She spent hours in Mark's office discussing event logistics. I would hear them laughing as I walked past. Whenever I entered the room, they would stop. "What's so funny?" I asked, a sliver of unease creeping in. "Just an inside joke about a client," Brenda said, offering that sickeningly sweet smile. "You wouldn't get it, Heather. It's a work thing." She began joining our business lunches. Then she started replacing me at them. "Heather, you stay and finish the quarterly projections," Mark would say. "Brenda and I will take the developers to the steakhouse. You know you hate small talk." I did hate small talk. I loved my work. So I let them go. I stayed in my office, eating a salad at my desk, crunching numbers, and keeping our profit margins healthy while my husband and my sister drank martinis and made me the punchline of their jokes. I noticed a change in Mark, too. He started dressing younger. He bought a Porsche he didn't need. He began coming home late, citing networking dinners. Whenever I expressed concern, Joyce gaslighted me completely. "You're being paranoid, Heather," she scolded. "You should be glad Mark and Brenda get along so well. Most men hate their in-laws. It's a blessing. Don't ruin it with your insecurity." She made me feel like an unstable, suspicious wife. Now, looking at the Project B folder on my laptop, the truth lay bare. Those networking dinners were dates. The business trips to Miami were vacations. The consulting fees paid to Brenda were actually an allowance for being his mistress. The snake hadn't just slithered into the grass. I had opened the door, invited her in, and warmed the milk myself. And the worst part was that my mother had been holding the door open. Joyce facilitated this. She pushed Brenda toward Mark, knowing exactly what Brenda was capable of. She wanted Brenda to have the life I worked to build because, in her twisted mind, Brenda belonged in the castle, and I was just the laborer who was supposed to leave once the construction was done. I slammed my fist onto the cheap motel desk. The sharp pain brought me back to reality. "Fine," I whispered to the empty room. "You want to play games? Let's see how fun it is when the architect pulls out the load-bearing walls." For the next 6 hours, I went into a forensic audit frenzy. The ghost key gave me access to everything, but I had to be extremely careful. If I made any changes, the system logs might alert the IT director, Steve, a man who used to be loyal to me but was now undoubtedly taking orders from Mark. So I became a ghost. I copied, downloaded, screenshotted, and traced the money. It was worse than I thought. H&M Real Estate was bleeding cash. To fund their lifestyle and transfer funds to Brenda's shell company, Mark had stopped paying our vendors. We were 3 months behind on payments to the construction crew for our new downtown high-rise. We were in default on the interest for 2 massive loans. Mark was robbing Peter to pay Brenda. The company, my life's work, had become a house of cards. If our creditors found out, we would be in bankruptcy court within 30 days. But then, I found something that made me sit upright. It was an email thread between Mark and a private investigation firm called Vance Investigations, dated 2 years ago. Subject, Target Surveillance H. Bryant. Mark, I need dirt, anything, infidelity, substance abuse, mental instability, I need a reason to void the prenup. Vance, Mr. Bryant, we've followed her for 6 months. She goes to work, the grocery store, and her mother's house. She works overtime. There is no dirt. The woman is a saint. Mark, look harder or make something up. I can't afford to lose half of this to her. I held my breath. 2 years. He had been planning to cast me aside for 2 years, searching for a way to do it without paying a dime. Then came a recent email, dated just last week. Mark, forget the dirt. We're going with the mental breakdown angle. Her family will testify. Her mother and sister are on board. We'll claim she's overworked, paranoid, and unfit to run the company. We'll force a board vote of no confidence. Once she's out, we trigger the buyout clause at minimum valuation. Joyce, I can testify that her behavior has been erratic lately, very emotional. I'm worried about her, Mark. We need to do what's best for the business. I stared at the screen, tears of rage blurring my vision. My own mother was plotting to frame me as mentally unstable so her golden child could steal my husband and my money. Erratic, I whispered. I'll show you erratic. I kept digging. I needed leverage. Evidence of an affair was useful, but proving it in court takes time. I needed something immediate, something that would terrify Mark. I found it in the tax returns. Last year, to secure a massive loan from a private equity firm, Mark had inflated the occupancy rates of our commercial properties. He forged leases for tenants. He actually forged signatures of tenants who didn't exist. That wasn't just civil fraud. That was bank fraud. That carried real federal prison time. And those loan documents were signed by one person, Mark Bryant, CEO. My signature wasn't on them. I was out of town that week attending my aunt's funeral, a funeral Brenda skipped, and Mark had said he would handle the paperwork. He had signed his own downfall, and he didn't even know it. I copied the loan documents. I copied the forged leases. I built an absolute nuclear option of a file. I checked the time. It was 2:00 p.m. I had been working for 12 hours straight. I was hungry, unwashed, and running entirely on adrenaline. I needed a burner phone. I couldn't use mine. They might be tracking it or pulling the call logs. I walked to the convenience store across the street and bought a cheap prepaid phone with cash. Back in my room, I sat on the bed and stared at the new device. Who could I call? My friends, most of them were mutual friends. They would likely side with charming Mark or stay neutral. My family? Absolutely not. My employees? Too risky. I needed someone powerful. Someone who despised Mark and had the resources to fight a war. A name flashed in my mind, Arthur Sterling. Arthur was a billionaire real estate tycoon in Chicago. Old money, ruthless, but highly principled. 3 years ago, Mark had outbid Arthur for a prime waterfront lot. Mark won because he bribed a city planning official to rezone the land. I had strongly advised against it, but Mark had gone behind my back. Arthur had suspected foul play. He had publicly called Mark a snake in a cheap suit. Mark laughed it off, but Arthur never forgot. If I went to Arthur Sterling with proof of Mark's fraud, specifically the fraud that cost Arthur that land deal, it would be a massive gamble. Arthur might just laugh at me. He might throw me out. But he was also the only man in Chicago with enough power to shield me from Mark's legal team. I dialed the number for Sterling Enterprises. I knew it by heart. I had stared at it plenty of times back when we were competitors. Sterling Enterprises, Executive Office. A crisp voice answered. I need to speak with Mr. Sterling immediately. Mr. Sterling is in a meeting. May I ask what this is regarding? Tell him it's Heather Bryant. Tell him I know how Mark Bryant got the waterfront zoning permit, and tell him I have the emails to prove it. A long pause. Please hold. 30 seconds later, a deep, gravelly voice came over the line. Mrs. Bryant, to what do I owe this pleasure? Did your husband send you to gloat? My husband just locked me out of my bank accounts and moved his mistress into my house, I said, my voice steady. I'm not here to gloat, Mr. Sterling. I'm here to burn him to the ground. And I thought you might want to bring some marshmallows. Silence, then a low chuckle. I'm listening. Before I went to see Arthur Sterling, I had one more wound to cauterize. In the H&M database, there was one file I had been avoiding. Tyler's trust fund. Tyler was my weak spot. I had spent his whole life protecting him from Mark's ego. When Mark forgot Tyler's birthdays, I bought the gifts and signed Mark's name. When Mark missed Tyler's games, I told Tyler his dad was working hard for our future. I raised him to believe his father was a hero, shielding him from the reality of a neglectful parent. I realized now that was my greatest mistake. I protected Tyler from the truth, and in doing so, I let Mark buy his loyalty with lies. I opened the trust documents. Mark had recently modified the terms. Originally, the trust was set to pay out at age 25, provided he graduated from college. The new terms, modified 2 weeks ago. Immediate access to $200,000 in cash. Transfer of ownership of a 2023 Porsche 911. And the accompanying message logs. Tyler, Dad, Mom is going to lose it if I drop out next semester. Mark, your mom is not going to be in charge much longer, Ty. She treats you like a child. I treat you like a man. You want the car? You want the cash? Just back me up when the time comes. You need to tell the lawyers your mom has been acting crazy lately, that she's emotionally unstable. Tyler, she has been really stressed out lately. Mark, exactly. She's losing her grip. We need to protect the company. You stand with me and I'll make you VP of Acquisitions next year. No degree needed. You can learn on the job like I did. Tyler, VP, seriously, all right, I'm in. What do I need to do? Reading those words, my heart broke into dust. VP of Acquisitions. Tyler had failed introductory macroeconomics. He spent his weekends playing video games and sleeping until noon. He wasn't qualified to run a lemonade stand, let alone a department in a multi-million-dollar company. Mark was setting him up for failure, inflating his ego just to use him as a chess piece against me. And Tyler, my baby boy, had sold out his mother for a Porsche and a title he hadn't earned. I remembered his text from last night. Dad says if you fight the divorce, he'll cut off my tuition. He wasn't worried about tuition. He was worried about his easy money. I pulled up Tyler's credit card statements, the card I paid for. Liquor stores, nightclubs, online gambling, gentlemen's clubs. He was sliding downward, and instead of parenting him, Mark was funding his descent to buy an ally. I picked up my burner phone. I hesitated. This was my son. But the boy who sat on that sofa and told me to accept my new reality was not the boy I raised. He was his father's creation. If I kept cushioning his falls, I would lose him forever to Mark's world of corruption and superficiality. The only way to save him was to let him hit the ground. I drafted a text. I didn't send it yet. I just kept the cursor blinking. Tyler, I saw the emails. I saw the car. You chose the easy path, but the easy path is a trap. When your father is done using you, he'll discard you just like he discarded me. I love you enough to let you learn this lesson the hard way. Good luck, Mr. Vice President. I saved the draft. I wiped my eyes. I navigated to the payroll system. I removed Tyler from the intern payroll list where he had been for 3 years, despite never coming to the office. I couldn't touch the trust. Mark controlled that now. But I could touch his health insurance. Tyler was on my policy, the one I paid for personally. Remove dependent, Tyler Bryant. Reason, no longer a full-time student. It was a small action, but it was the first time in 21 years I hadn't stepped in to solve his problem for him. My phone vibrated. It was the address for the meeting with Arthur Sterling. 1 hour, Union League Club Library, come alone. I closed my laptop, went to the bathroom, and splashed cold water on my face. I tried to smooth my hair. My suit was wrinkled, but I just brushed it off. I put on a layer of lipstick, my armor. I looked in the mirror. The woman looking back looked exhausted, yes, but she also looked dangerous. She looked like a mother who had lost everything and had nothing left to fear. You wanted emotionally unstable, Mark, I said to the glass. I'll show you what an earthquake looks like. I walked into the Union League Club wearing the wrinkled suit I had fled in, clutching a laptop bag filled with enough evidence to send my husband to federal prison. The doorman eyed me with suspicion. The place smelled of old money, cigars, and mahogany, the world where Arthur Sterling ruled. I found him in the library, sitting in a leather wingback chair, reading the Financial Times. He was 65, with a mane of silver hair and eyes like polished flint. He didn't stand when I approached. Mrs. Bryant, he said, folding his paper, you look terrible. I feel terrible, I admitted, sinking into the chair opposite him. But my mind is working perfectly. You mentioned the waterfront deal, Arthur said, getting straight to the point. You said you had proof. I opened my laptop. I didn't waste time with pleasantries. I pulled up the archive I had organized in the motel room and turned the screen toward him. 3 years ago, Mark outbid you for the waterfront lot. You suspected he bribed zoning commissioner Frank Miller. You were right. Arthur leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. Here are the wire transfers, I pointed to the screen. $50,000 sent to a shell company called Miller Consulting. And here are the emails between Mark and Miller regarding the expedited rezoning. Mark was sloppy. He used his personal email for the initial contact. Arthur scanned the documents. His expression didn't change, but the air around him seemed to grow colder. Why are you showing me this now? You were the COO. You benefited from this deal too. I didn't know about it at the time, I said, my voice steady. Mark kept a shadow ledger. I found it last night after he kicked me out of my house, froze my accounts, and moved my sister into my bed. Arthur looked up, a trace of surprise crossing his face. Your sister? With my mother cheering them on, I added with a dry laugh. A real family reunion, and I was the only one not invited. I took a deep breath. Mr. Sterling, I'm not here for sympathy. I'm here to make a deal. Mark is trying to ruin me. He forged my signature on fraudulent loans. He is embezzling company funds. He's going to leave H&M Real Estate in ruins. And you want me to save you? Arthur asked, raising an eyebrow. No, I want you to help me bury him. In exchange, I'll give you the waterfront lot. Arthur paused. Go on. Mark is overextended. He's short on cash and about to default on a major construction loan. If you step in now as a bridge lender to save that project, he'll take it. He's desperate. Then we write a collateral clause into the loan agreement. When he defaults, which he will because I know the real financial numbers, you seize the assets, specifically the deed to the waterfront lot. Arthur stared at me for a long moment. The silence was heavy and tense. Then a slow smile spread across his face. It wasn't a warm smile. It was the look of one apex predator recognizing another. You're vindictive, aren't you? Arthur said softly. I'm efficient, I corrected. Mark thinks I'm a discarded wife who's going to cry in a corner. He doesn't realize I'm the one who wrote his business plan. Arthur closed my laptop and slid it back to me. I like you, Heather. You have backbone. Mark always struck me as a peacock, all feathers, no flight. But you're a hawk. He pulled out his phone. I'm calling my personal counsel. He's the best litigator in Chicago. He'll represent you in the divorce. Pro bono. Consider it an investment in our new partnership. Thank you, I whispered, a wave of relief washing over me. And Heather, Arthur added, his eyes hardening. Don't disappoint me. If we do this, we undo him completely. No mercy, no going back. When he starts complaining. He won't just complain, I said, remembering the smirk on Mark's face when he took my ring. He's going to watch everything slide away. Arthur nodded. Good. Now let's get you a hotel room, one that doesn't charge by the hour. You can't plan a strategy without some sleep. That night I slept in a suite at the Four Seasons, courtesy of Sterling Enterprises. I took a long bath, washing away the motel grime. As I lay in the crisp sheets, I felt a shift deep inside. For 20 years, I had been the fixer. I had covered up Mark's mistakes, cleaned up his messes, and made him look brilliant. I had been the invisible glue keeping everything together. Now, I was going to be the solvent. I was going to dissolve everything he thought he owned. I picked up my burner phone and sent Arthur a single word. Ready. 3 days later, the trap was set. Arthur's attorney, a clinical man named David Cohen, drafted the settlement agreement. It was a masterpiece of legal misdirection. On the surface, it looked like a total surrender. The proposal. Mark keeps the marital home. Mark keeps 100% ownership of H&M real estate. Heather receives a lump sum of $500,000, a mere fraction of what I was owed. Heather waives all future claims to spousal support. It looked like I was giving up. It looked like I was broken, desperate for cash, and just wanted to run away. Mark would love it. It fed his ego perfectly. But buried deep within the 60-page document, in Section 14, subsection C, paragraph 4 was a clause. If it is discovered that either party to this agreement engaged in undisclosed illegal activity, fraud, or embezzlement during the marriage, or is convicted of a felony within 24 months of signing, this agreement is null and void. In such event, all assets, including 100% of company stock and real property, shall revert to the non-offending party as punitive damages. Mark never read the fine print. He paid lawyers to do that. But his lawyer, Robert Vance, was lazy. I knew this because I used to pay his bills. Vance only skimmed contracts, looking at the big numbers, the payouts, the alimony. He wouldn't look for a specific recovery clause buried in boilerplate language about liability. I met Mark and his lawyer in Vance's office. I wore no makeup. I wore an old sweater. I kept my eyes on the floor. I needed to play the part of the defeated woman. Mark walked in like he owned the city, wearing a new Italian suit and smelling of expensive cologne, probably a gift from Brenda. Well, look who crawled out of her hole, Mark sneered as he sat down. I hope you're ready to sign, Heather. Brenda and I have wedding invitations to order. Just give me the check, I said, my voice shaking. I just want to leave, Mark. I can't fight you anymore. Mark laughed, glancing at Vance. See, I told you she'd fold. She doesn't have the stomach for a fight. Vance slid the papers across the table. Standard agreement, Heather. You walk with $500,000. Clean break. Just sign here, here, and here. I picked up the pen. My hand was shaking, partly from the act, partly from sheer adrenaline. What about Tyler? I asked quietly. Tyler stays with me, Mark said, leaning back. He's my VP now. We're going to build an empire without your constant nagging. I felt a sharp pain in my chest, but I pushed it down. Fine, take care of him. Just sign the papers, Heather. I signed. I put my name on the line that seemingly stripped away 20 years of my hard work. Then Mark signed. He did it with a flourish, putting a big, arrogant loop on his initials. It's done, Vance said, closing the folder. The wire will hit your account tomorrow. Mark stood up, buttoning his jacket. He looked down at me with that smirk that used to make me shrink. You know, Heather, you should thank me. You were always too plain for this life. Go buy a cottage somewhere. Find a nice librarian. Goodbye. Goodbye, Mark, I whispered. As I walked toward the elevator, I heard Mark and Vance laughing. That was easier than I thought. She didn't even ask for the beach house. The elevator doors closed, cutting off his laughter. I leaned against the metal wall, letting out a long breath. He signed. The clause was active. Now all I had to do was prove the fraud, and I already had the evidence. I just needed the right stage to present it. And what better stage than a wedding? Mark and Brenda had announced their wedding date. It was just 3 weeks away. A quick wedding, they called it. They wanted to be official before the spring social season. They wanted an audience. 3 weeks, that was my timeline. I walked out of the building and got into Arthur's waiting car. "Did he sign?" Arthur asked from the back seat. "He signed," I said, a genuine smile finally spreading across my face. "He thinks he bought my silence for $500,000. He just signed his entire life over to me." Arthur handed me a glass of sparkling water. "To the architect and the demolition." "To the demolition," I replied. The next 3 weeks were a study in patience. I had to remain invisible while Mark and Brenda flaunted their victory all over Chicago. I rented a small, nondescript apartment on the north side under my maiden name. I spent my days with Arthur's forensic accountants, organizing our files. We turned the raw data I had retrieved into a legal hammer. Every night, I looked at social media. Brenda's Instagram was an obnoxious display of extravagance. A photo of a new Mercedes convertible. "Hubby-to-be spoils me, blessed new beginnings." A photo of my dining room, redecorated in tacky gold wallpaper. Out with the old, in with the glamorous. Finally making this house a real home. It stung to watch her erase my presence from the home I built. But the post that hurt most came from my mother. Joyce posted a picture of the three of them, Mark, Brenda, and herself, raising champagne glasses at a tasting dinner. The caption, "Finally, a family that knows how to enjoy life. So proud of my beautiful daughter Brenda and my wonderful son-in-law Mark. True love always wins. True love." True love. She had sold out her eldest daughter for a seat at a high-end restaurant table. As for Tyler, he was quiet on social media. But I saw his activity through the secondary credit card alerts I was still monitoring, which Mark hadn't discovered yet. Liquor stores, $400. Nightclubs, $1,200. A bail bondsman, $500. My son was spiraling. Mark wasn't parenting him, he was enabling him. I wanted to run to save him, but Arthur stopped me. "You can't save someone who doesn't want to be saved, Heather," Arthur told me gently. "He chose his side. Let him see what that side looks like when the lights go out." I knew he was right, but it felt like severing my own arm. Meanwhile, the company was rotting from within. My inside contacts, Sarah in accounting and Jim in project management, sent me daily updates. "Mark hasn't stayed past 2 in the afternoon in weeks," Sarah texted. "He let Brenda plan the company rebranding. She wants to change the logo to pink and gold." Pink and gold, for a commercial real estate firm. "The contractors on the Highland project are threatening to walk off," Jim reported. "Mark told them the checks are in the mail. They aren't. He used the construction loan draw to pay for the wedding venue." "Let it burn," I told them. "Just document everything. Save every email where he tells you to delay payments." The wedding was to be held at the Palmer House Hilton in the Grand Ballroom. It was the most expensive venue in the city. Brenda had invited 300 guests, investors, politicians, local elites. They wanted to cement themselves as Chicago's new power couple. They wanted a show. Perfect, I thought, looking at an invitation Sarah had slipped me. They want a show, I'll give them one. 2 days before the wedding, I received the final, most crucial piece of evidence. It came from an unexpected source. My phone rang, unknown number. "Hello." "Heather, it's Dave." Dave, Brenda's ex-husband, the mechanic she had cleaned out. "Dave," I said, surprised. "How are you?" "I'm all right. Look, I heard what happened. What they did to you, it's awful." "It is," I agreed. "I have something," Dave said, his voice dropping. "When Brenda left me, she left a box of files in the garage. I was going to burn them, but I went through them last night, Heather. She had credit cards in your name from 3 years ago." My blood ran cold. "What?" "She opened them while she was staying at your house. She intercepted the mail. She maxed them out and hid the bills. I found the collection letters, and I found a note from Mark." "From Mark?" Yeah, he paid off one of the cards for her. The note says, I took care of this one, B, but you have to be more careful. If Heather sees this on her credit report, we're both finished. Keep playing the part. Just 2 more years and we take it all. 2 more years. The timeline fit perfectly. Mark had been conspiring with my sister to steal my identity and my money while I was feeding her and giving her a job. Dave, I said, my voice trembling, can you bring that box to me? I'm already on my way, he said. When Dave handed me that box, I felt the final lock click into place. This wasn't just fraud. This was a conspiracy, predatory, calculated, and malicious. I looked at Mark's handwriting. Just 2 more years and we take it all. I placed the note in my safe. Thank you, Dave, I said. Give him hell, Heather, he said with a grim smile. Oh, I plan to, I replied. I plan to bring the fire. The day before the wedding, I did something risky. I went to see Tyler. I knew I shouldn't. Arthur advised against it. But I was a mother first and an ex-wife second. I needed to give him one last chance to step off the sinking ship. I waited outside his new penthouse, the one Mark bought with company funds. At 11 in the morning, Tyler stumbled out, looking hungover. He wore designer sunglasses and a hoodie that cost more than my first car. Tyler, I called out. He jumped, turning around. His face fell when he saw me. Mom, what are you doing here? Are you stalking me now? I'm not stalking you. I'm trying to save you. I don't need saving, he spat, walking toward his Porsche. I'm doing great. Dad just put me in charge of the South Side portfolio. Tyler, listen to me, I said, stepping in front of him. Your father is lying to you. The company is broke. He's taking money to pay for this lifestyle. He's setting you up. When the authorities step in, and they will, your name is on those documents. Tyler laughed. It was a hollow, fragile sound. You're just jealous. You're jealous because Dad is winning and you're nothing. You're living in some dump now, right? Dad told me. I'm living in reality, I said urgently. Tyler, please, don't go to the wedding tomorrow. Just call in sick. Go to a friend's house. Just don't be standing next to him when this goes down. When what goes down? He asked mockingly. Are you going to crash it? Make a scene? God, you're pathetic, Mom. Dad said you'd try to ruin it. He called me pathetic. I felt the anger rise, but I pushed it down. Tyler, look at me. I raised you. I know who you are. You're not like this. You're kind, you're smart, and you are not a thief. I'm not a thief, he shouted, his face flushing a deep red. I'm a businessman just like Dad. Your father is a fraud, I yelled back. And Brenda is a parasite. If you stay with them, you're going down with them. Tyler glared at me, his eyes filled with resentment. He pulled out his phone. I'm calling security. Get away from me. He got into his car and slammed on the gas. As he sped out of the parking lot, he leaned out the window and shouted, Don't show up tomorrow, Mom. Nobody wants you there. You're history. I watched him drive away and my heart broke all over again. But this time the break was clean. I had tried. I had reached out my hand and he had slapped it away. Now he was on his own. I drove back to my apartment. Arthur was waiting for me, putting the finishing touches on our plan. How did it go? He asked, though he clearly already knew the answer just by looking at my face. He's gone, I said, my voice flat. He's completely under his father's spell. Then he'll have to learn the hard way, Arthur said. Are you ready for tomorrow? Yes. Do we have the access codes to the projector system? We do, and the police have been briefed. Detective Miller will meet us in the lobby tomorrow night at 8. Arthur handed me a garment bag. Then you'll need this. I unzipped it. Inside was a suit. But it wasn't the outfit of a panicked, desperate ex-wife. It was a sharp, tailored Black Eve St. Laurent tuxedo. Powerful, elegant, and cold. Put on your armor, Heather, Arthur said. Tomorrow, you aren't the victim. You're the one bringing the truth. I touched the fabric. It felt cool and smooth. Thank you, Arthur. Get some rest, he said. Tomorrow is going to be a very long night. I didn't rest. I sat by the window, watching the city lights. I pictured Mark and Brenda, probably practicing their vows at this very moment, laughing about how they had gotten away with everything. Just 2 more years, and we take it all. They weren't getting 2 years. They didn't even have 2 days. Tomorrow, the new Mr. and Mrs. Bryant were going to have a very different kind of wedding reception. The morning of the wedding, the sky was gray and heavy with clouds. It was perfect Chicago weather for a funeral. I spent the morning reviewing the presentation. Our timing had to be precise. It was scheduled to play immediately after the $20,000 love story video montage Brenda had commissioned. At 6 in the evening, the guests began arriving at the Palmer house. I watched the live stream from the hidden cameras Arthur had installed in the ballroom. Since he owned a stake in the hotel, getting access was incredibly easy. The feed was stomach-turning. The room was dripping with crystals and filled with thousands of pink roses. There was even an ice sculpture of Mark and Brenda intertwined. I saw my mother, Joyce, welcoming the guests. She wore a champagne-colored gown that was far too youthful for her. She was beaming as if she had personally hit the jackpot. "Yes, isn't it wonderful?" I heard her say to a confused cousin. "They are soulmates, Heather." Well, poor Heather just couldn't handle Mark's success. She's taking some time away. I saw Mark. He looked nervous but triumphant, shaking hands, patting backs, playing the part of the benevolent king. And then there was Brenda. She walked in wearing a custom Vera Wang gown, practically dripping in diamonds. Diamonds paid for by my company. I had to admit she looked beautiful and corrupt. The ceremony began. I listened to them exchange their vows. "I promise to be your partner in all things," Mark said, looking deeply into Brenda's eyes. "I promise to support your dreams and spend my life making you happy," Brenda replied softly. I sat in my hotel suite upstairs, sipping black coffee. "Lies," I whispered, every single word. "Are we ready?" Arthur asked, checking his watch. "The feed is patched in," the technician confirmed. "Just say the word and we override their signal." "Not yet," I said. "Wait for the toasts. Wait until everyone is seated and looking at the screen." The reception began. The champagne flowed. Mark stood up to make his speech. "I want to thank everyone for coming today," he said, his voice booming as he held Brenda's hand. "It's been a long road to find true happiness. Sometimes you have to make hard choices to find where you truly belong." The crowd applauded politely, though I noticed a few uneasy glances. People knew about the scandal, but as long as the premium open bar was flowing, they didn't care. "To my new wife, Brenda," Mark continued, "you are my inspiration, my rock, my everything." My phone vibrated. It was the signal. "Now," I said. Down in the ballroom, the lights dimmed, and the video montage began to play. Soft, romantic music filled the room. Photos of Mark and Brenda on a yacht in Paris and on beaches flashed on the giant screen behind the head table. The crowd let out collective sighs of admiration. I stood up, smoothed my tuxedo jacket, walked out of the suite, and headed for the elevator. "Showtime," Arthur said, walking beside me. In the elevator, I watched the numbers count down. 10, 9, 8. My heart wasn't racing anymore. It beat slow and steady, like a metronome. The elevator doors opened on the lobby level. Detective Miller and 2 uniformed officers were waiting. "Mrs. Bryant," the detective asked. "Yes, we have the warrants. We're ready when you are." "Give me 5 minutes," I said. "I want them to see the screen first." "Understood." I walked toward the ballroom doors. The security guards Mark had hired to keep me out stepped forward. "Ma'am, this is a private event." Arthur Sterling stepped out from behind me. "And I own this building. Move aside, or you'll be looking for a new job tomorrow." The guards hesitated, recognized Arthur, and immediately stepped back. I pushed open the double doors. Inside, the music was swelling to a climax. The screen showed Mark and Brenda kissing in front of the Eiffel Tower. Then the screen flickered. The music stopped abruptly with a sharp screech of static. The room went dead silent. On the giant screen, the romantic images vanished. In their place appeared a harsh, white spreadsheet with columns of red numbers. Then a document appeared, a credit card statement. Name, Brenda Miller. Address, 124 Oak Lane, my house. Item purchased, Cartier diamond ring, $25,000. Payment source, H&M corporate account. A murmur rippled through the crowd. What is that? Brenda shrieked, standing up. Mark, fix it, turn it off. Mark yelled toward the audiovisual booth. Turn it off. But the technician in the booth was working for us. He didn't turn it off. He turned the volume up. Then, my pre-recorded voice boomed through the speakers. Hello, Mark. Hello, Brenda. You wanted a family gathering. You wanted everyone to witness your union. Well, let's show them exactly what this union is built on. Every eye in the room turned away from the screen and toward the back of the room. I walked in. The silence in the grand ballroom was absolute. 300 people turned in their seats to stare. I walked down the center aisle, my heels clicking rhythmically on the marble floor. The black tuxedo made me look like a shadow against the sea of pink flowers. Mark froze at the head table, the color completely draining from his face. Brenda clutched her napkin to her chest, her mouth open in shock. My mother, Joyce, looked like she was about to faint. Heather, Mark whispered, his microphone catching his trembling voice. What are you doing? I stopped right in the middle of the dance floor, directly in front of the head table. I looked up at them, these people who used to be my entire world, now reduced to small, terrified figures on a stage. I'm here to make a toast, I said, my voice carrying clearly across the room without a microphone. I raised a small remote control. I pressed the button. The screen behind them changed again. This time, it showed the email thread between Mark and the private investigator. Mark, look harder or make something up. I can't afford to lose half of this to her. The crowd gasped. I saw the investors, the people Mark respected, the people he needed, whispering angrily to one another. Turn it off, Mark screamed, lunging toward the DJ booth. Security, get her out of here. Sit down, Mark. Arthur Sterling's voice boomed from the doorway, commanding and loud. Unless you want to add assault to your growing list of legal issues. Mark froze. He saw Arthur. He saw the police officers waiting in the shadows of the exit. This is a fabrication, Brenda yelled, tears streaming down her perfectly made-up face. She's jealous, she hacked us, she's crazy, crazy. I clicked the remote again. A new document appeared. The fraudulent loan application for the waterfront project, the one with my forged signature sloppily pasted onto it. Is forgery crazy, Brenda? I asked calmly. Is bank fraud crazy? Because that's a federal crime. And guess whose name is on the shell company that received those stolen funds? I clicked the button again. Orion Holdings, owner, Brenda Miller. You, I said, pointing to my sister. You weren't just his partner. You were his shield. Mark used you to move $3 million. Did he tell you that? Did he tell you that when the IRS came looking, it was your signature they'd be tracking? Brenda spun to look at Mark, her eyes wide with terror. Mark, you said it was tax planning. You said it was legal. Shut up, Brenda, Mark hissed. Oh, don't stop him, I said with a cold smile. Let him explain. Let him explain to our mother what he really thinks of her. Click, an email appeared on the screen. Subject, the old bat. Mark, just write Joyce another check from the side account. The old bat is greedy. As long as we pay for her condo, she'll keep quiet. She'd sell out her own daughter for a kitchen remodel budget. Joyce let out a choking sound. She stood up, her hands shaking so violently she knocked over her champagne glass. Mark, she whispered, her voice cracking. After everything I did for you, you called me that. I stood by you. I turned against my own child for you. And look what it got you, Mom, I said, looking at her with genuine pity. A front row seat to a crime scene. Mark looked around wildly. He was watching his empire collapse in real time. He saw the investors leaving their tables. He saw the waitstaff stopping to watch. He saw the end. You signed the settlement, he screamed at me in desperation. You signed it. You gave up everything. You can't touch the company. Section 14, I said simply. The recovery clause. In the event of fraudulent activity, the agreement is null and void. Everything, the house, the company, the assets, belongs to me. Mark's knees buckled. He collapsed back into his chair. And then there's Tyler, I said, turning my gaze to my son, who sat at the end of the table, pale as a ghost. Tyler looked at me in horror as the screen displayed his own text messages. Tyler, VP, seriously, all right, I'm in. You wanted to be a businessman, Tyler, I said softly. Here is your first lesson. Know who you are doing business with. I pressed the remote one last time. A video played. It was surveillance footage from the company parking lot. It showed Mark arguing with Brenda just 2 days ago. Mark on video. Once we get the cash from Sterling, we drop the kid. Tyler is a liability. We leave him with the tax debt and move to Monaco. He's too foolish to even notice. The silence in the ballroom was absolute. Tyler slowly stood up. He looked at his father. The hero worship in his eyes was replaced by a heartbreaking realization. Dad, Tyler whispered, you were going to leave me behind. No, I was under stress. That's out of context, Mark stammered. You called me foolish, Tyler said, his voice shaking. You said I was a liability. Tyler, sit down, Mark tried to assert control. Don't listen to her. Tyler didn't sit down. He picked up his champagne glass and threw the contents directly into Mark's face. I hate you, Tyler screamed. I hate you. The room erupted into chaos. Joyce was sobbing, Brenda was hyperventilating, and Mark was wiping champagne from his face, looking completely defeated. I lowered the remote. The presentation was over. I nodded to Detective Miller. The officers marched into the room. The guests parted like the Red Sea. Mark Bryant, the detective announced. You are under arrest for bank fraud, embezzlement, and forgery. Brenda Miller, you are under arrest for conspiracy and money laundering. No, Brenda shrieked as the officer grabbed her wrists. I didn't know, I'm just his girlfriend. He made me do it. Tell it to the judge, the officer said, clicking the handcuffs into place. Mark didn't scream. He just stared at me. As they led him away, he locked eyes with me. You ruined everything, he spat. You bitter, vindictive woman. I stepped close to him, close enough to smell his fear. I didn't ruin anything, Mark, I said, as calm as a frozen lake. I just turned on the lights, and you're just a cockroach getting caught. They dragged him out. The wedding guests stood in stunned silence. The only sound was Joyce's quiet weeping. I took one last look at the head table. The cake was uncut. The flowers were still perfect. The illusion was completely gone. I turned to Arthur Sterling. I believe my business here is concluded. Brilliant, Arthur said, offering me his arm. Absolutely brilliant. As we walked out, I didn't look back at my crying mother or my broken son. It wasn't time yet. They had made their bed, and tonight they had to sleep in it. The days following the wedding were a media whirlwind. The Chicago Tribune ran the story on the front page. Wedding bells to jail cells. Real estate mogul arrested at altar. I didn't give any interviews. I let the evidence speak for itself. 3 days later, I moved back into my house. The police had cleared the scene and lifted the tape. It was strange walking through the rooms I had designed myself. Brenda's things were everywhere. Tacky clothes, cheap magazines, half-empty wine bottles. I hired a cleaning crew. Get rid of all of it, I told them. Everything that isn't mine. Wash down every surface and replace the mattresses. I wanted their presence scrubbed from my life. Mark was denied bail. Because of his recorded plan to flee, the judge ruled him a flight risk. He was sitting in Cook County Jail, trading his Italian suits for a standard uniform. Brenda was released on bail, paid for by my mother. Joyce had liquidated her retirement savings to get her favorite daughter out. But Brenda wasn't free. She was facing 5 to 10 years. Her face was splashed across the internet, labeled as a gold digger facing serious charges. I walked into the H&M offices, which were now entirely mine. The staff greeted me with a mix of anxiety and immense relief. We're renaming the company, I announced at my first all-hands meeting. H&M is finished. Welcome to Phoenix Holdings. They applauded. They knew who actually kept the lights on. A week later, my mother came to see me. She looked 10 years older. Her hair was unkempt and her eyes were red. She stood on my porch, shivering. "Heather," she said, her voice trembling. "Joyce," I said, blocking the doorway. I didn't call her Mom. "Can I come in? It's freezing out here." "Whatever you have to say, you can say it right there." She flinched. "Heather, please be reasonable. Brenda is terrified. She's just a girl. She didn't know what she was doing. Mark manipulated her." "Brenda is 40 years old," I said coldly. "She knew she was sleeping with my husband. She knew she was spending my money. She signed those papers." "She's your sister," Joyce cried. "You can't let her go to prison. You have to drop the charges. Tell the district attorney it was a misunderstanding." "It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a crime." "If you do this," Joyce hissed, her grief turning back into that familiar venom, "you are no daughter of mine. You are destroying this family." I laughed. It was a light, freeing sound. "Joyce, you destroyed this family 20 years ago when you decided Brenda was the princess, and I was the servant. You aren't here to apologize. You're here to ask me to fix your problems again. You want me to be the scapegoat one last time so Brenda can walk away. She's delicate. She's a criminal. And you're an accomplice. I saw the checks Mark wrote to you, consulting fees. You took the money and helped him gaslight me." Joyce's face went pale. "I'm not pressing charges against you, Joyce," I said. "Not because I love you, but because I don't want the embarrassment of seeing my mother in a mugshot. But as far as I'm concerned, we're done. Don't call me. Don't come here. If you need money, ask Brenda. Oh, wait, she's broke." I closed the door firmly. I watched her through the security camera as she banged on the door, screaming my name, before her shoulders slumped and she finally walked away. It hurt, of course, but it was the kind of pain that comes from pulling out a thorn. First a sharp sting, then relief. And then there was Tyler. He didn't call, and he didn't visit. I knew he was sleeping on a friend's couch because the authorities had seized his penthouse and his Porsche. I waited. I knew he had to come to me on his own terms. 2 weeks later, he showed up at my office. He looked terrible. He had lost weight, and he was wearing old jeans and a t-shirt. No sunglasses, no attitude. "Mom," he asked from the doorway. I looked up from my desk. "Hello, Tyler." He walked in and sat in the chair opposite me, staring at his hands. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I know," I said. "I was stupid. He made me feel important. He told me I was too good for school. He told me you were holding me back." "You believed him because it was easier than working hard," I said, gentle but firm. "Yeah," he admitted, tears hitting his jeans. "I saw the video. He called me a liability. He was going to leave me." "I have nothing left, Mom. They took the car. I don't have any money. I need help." I looked at my son. I wanted to hug him. I wanted to write him a check and make all his problems go away. But I was the architect now. You don't build a strong structure on a cracked foundation. "I love you, Tyler," I said, "but I'm not giving you money." He looked up, panicked. "Then where do I live? I don't know what to do." "Mom, please." "Here are my terms," I said, sliding 2 papers across the desk. "This is an application for a student loan, and this is an application for a job in the mailroom at Phoenix Holdings. Minimum wage. You start at the bottom and you finish your degree at night." "The mailroom?" he asked, shocked. "But—" "Take it or leave it. If you want to be a businessman, Tyler, you're going to earn it. Mark gave you things to buy you. I'm giving you nothing so you can build yourself." He stared at the papers, then at me, seeing the resolve in my eyes. Slowly, he reached out and took the pen. "Okay," he said, his voice shaky. "I'll take the job." "Good," I said. "Report to Sarah in HR. She'll get you set up with a badge. Don't be late." He stood up and looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time in years. "You're kind of terrifying, Mom," he said with a hint of admiration. I smiled. "I know, now go to work." The trial was short. The evidence was overwhelming. Mark Bryant took a plea deal to avoid a 20-year sentence. He was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison, plus restitution. He looked gray and broken in court, never looking at me once. Brenda took a plea deal too, receiving 3 years for her role in the scheme. She sobbed loudly as the gavel fell, screaming for our mother in the gallery. But Joyce couldn't do anything. Joyce was now living in a studio apartment, surviving on Social Security, stripped of her lifestyle and her pride. I sat in the back row in a dark suit, watching justice get served. I didn't feel joy. I felt peace. The ledger was finally balanced. A year later, I stood in my office on the 40th floor, looking out over the Chicago River. The sign behind me read, Phoenix Holdings, in sleek silver and blue, with no pink in sight. The company was thriving. We had just finalized the waterfront deal with Arthur Sterling. It was going to be a mixed-use development, luxury condos, but also affordable housing and a community center. My phone vibrated. Tyler, hey mom, just finished my economics final. I think I got an A also. The mailroom team increased sorting efficiency by 15% this week. Do I get a raise? I smiled. Me, don't push your luck, but dinner is on me tonight, 7 o'clock. Tyler, see you there. He was working hard. He was tired, broke, and humbled, and I had never been prouder of him. He was becoming the man I knew he could be, not the caricature his father tried to create. There was a knock on my door. Come in. Arthur Sterling walked in, holding a bottle of champagne. Happy anniversary, he said, to 1 year since you dismantled that circus. It feels like a lifetime ago, I said, taking the glass. You know, Arthur said, leaning against my desk, Mark sent me a letter from prison. He wanted to know if I'd buy his remaining shares in some old holdings. He needs commissary money. What did you tell him? I told him I only do business with the CEO, and she's busy building an empire. We clinked our glasses. I looked out at the skyline. I had lost a husband, a sister, and a mother, but I had found myself. I was no longer the scapegoat, the fixer, or the invisible wife. I am Heather Bryant, the architect, and my life is finally completely my own. Thank you for listening to my story. It wasn't easy to relive, but if my experience helps even one person stand up to the toxic people in their lives, then it was worth it. Family isn't always defined by blood. Family is made of the people who respect you, value you, and stand by you in a storm. If you're holding on to someone just because they're related to you, but they keep dragging you down, let go. You are strong enough to build something new. If you enjoyed this story and want to see more paths to justice, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow, and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. Let me know in the comments. Have you ever had to cut ties with a toxic family member? How did you find the strength? I read every comment, and I'd love to hear your story. Until next time, stay strong, stay smart, and never let anyone take the keys to your castle.